Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. How many of you have ever had your heart or your gut say, yes, only to have your head say, not a chance? Yeah. That happens to me all the time. Fortunately, when I was invited to speak on wonder, my whole being just said, yes, that's a perfect topic for me. And I didn't give my head a chance to say anything. It just was a yes. And about a month later, when I started thinking about, okay, what am I going to say? My head was like, what were you thinking? I was like, I wasn't. For me, the gift of this, and I am so grateful to Creative Mornings, because the gift of developing this presentation has allowed me to see that wonder is really the thread that runs through my entire personal and professional life. My gut was right. From the time I was little and all the way through today, my whole life is about wanting to push beyond our self-limiting beliefs and what we think is reality. And the very first memory that I can recall where my child worldview, which I didn't know I had, but it got kind of cracked open, was walking in the woods with my mom and dad. And when growing up, my parents used to take us out into the either the woods, the desert, the tidal pools, the mountains. And my dad was a naturalist, and so he knew a whole lot about all the animals and the rocks and the plants, and he would teach us about that. And I was more struck by the way he talked about those things. There was a reverence in his voice. There was something magic in the way he talked about them that I couldn't figure out. And then one day I'm walking in the woods behind our house with my parents, and we came around a corner, and there's a rabbit sitting right by a bush. And so we all stopped. And my dad kind of crouched a little bit, and in this kind of melodic, soothing, sing-songy, almost hypnotic tone, started talking to the rabbit. Hello, Mrs. Rabbit. Don't be afraid. And he moved very slowly. And he kept talking to her. And you know how rabbits, usually they freeze and then they flee. Well, it froze. And then I was watching, the more he talked, the more relaxed the body of the rabbit got. And he got within about 2 feet of it, and it rolled over on its back and flopped its paws open. And he bent down, he rubbed it, talking to it, and then stood back up, and the rabbit righted itself and just hopped off with no stress. And my mom and I were like, what? What just happened? And when I asked my dad about that, how'd you do that? I want to do that. He said, well, I've spent a lifetime in the woods. He was far more comfortable relating to nature than he was to people. And much as I wanted to be like the rabbit whisperer, I really was drawn to people. I loved the woods, but the idea of spending hours out in the woods by myself was not attractive. And over time, I began to see that the possibility for us to connect with nature was an inside job. It was that nature is always willing. In fact, nature is probably always in relationship to us, but we have to turn towards it. And so one day when I was in college, I was hiking in the woods with a friend of mine, and I decided to wonder out loud about our ability to actually connect with, to talk with the trees and have them understand and for them to communicate. And I really was interested in, what would it feel like if a tree was talking back to me? How would it sound? And I anticipated that he, being a philosopher, would be wide open to such a conversation, or a philosophy major. But in fact, he just looked at me very dismissively and said, trees have no nervous system. They can't possibly have consciousness. And rocks are inanimate objects. And I was stunned. So I thought, okay, I'm going to invite nature to play. And I asked him if he would be willing to sit quietly and not move, and to see if we could invite nature to actually show him that there was more out there. And he was, of course, perfectly willing to do that, and perfectly willing to show me that I was wrong. So we sat, and of course I had no idea, is nature going to respond or not respond? And we sat quietly, and there was a chipmunk that was skittering in and out of rocks that were nearby. So I silently reached out to the chipmunk, as well as to the trees that were around, just kind of imploring them to do something that would crack open this rigid worldview that he seemed to have, even at the age of 22. And after about 4 minutes, the chipmunk started to move closer to us. And then there was this quick darting onto his knee. Chipmunk looked up at him, looked over at me, and then darted off again. And I was like, there, see? And he looked at me and he was like, that doesn't mean anything. And years later, when I asked him about it, he said that never happened. Now, Einstein said, the man that doesn't wonder is dead to the world. They don't have eyes to see. Wonder really pulls us outside of that rigid confines of the worldview that we've adopted, but we didn't come in with it. You heard early this morning, children are like seeds of wonder. Their whole life is wonder because everything is new. And we gradually adopt this framework that says this is the way the world is, and this is reality, and this is not reality. And I keep having experiences that when I get stuck in my reality that keep kind of bopping me on the head saying, no, not yet. And so I've set about for my whole life to create environments or situations where people can experience that they are more than who they are. And this led me to become an outdoor experiential facilitator. How many of you have been on a ropes course, low, high? Okay, so that's what I did for about 15 years. And initially, I started out describing the activities as activities that were designed to teach teamwork and leadership. And over time, and it wasn't that much time, but over time what I realized was these activities, and many of you know, they look impossible, right? And then you've got this group of people, and the rules are really simple. There's like 1 or 2 rules, and that's it. And then this group of people goes, oh, that's impossible, and then they proceed to do it, time after time after time. Even dysfunctional groups are capable of doing these activities when they're left on their own to do them. And so I began to think these activities aren't designed to teach. They're designed to bring out these inherent capacities that are human qualities: teamwork, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, shared leadership. And that got me thinking about, why don't we have organizations that are designed to bring those things out in people? Schools that are designed to help kids tap into that. And so I moved out of facilitating those events because it didn't feel authentic to me anymore. and they're still very, very powerful. If I were doing it today, I would be debriefing around what was it about the structure of this activity and the rules that allowed you to do, rather than debriefing around teamwork. But I went back into graduate school and studied collaborative learning. And in the process, came upon the idea that we create our social realities through the way we make meaning together, through the way we engage in conversation, the questions we ask. And that for quite a long time was a cognitive notion for me. And I got it, but it was in my head. That if we change the way we're engaging, we can create different meaning. We create the structures of our organizations. We can create different structures. So let's do that. So a lot of my work after that was working with organizations about looking at how to redesign the structures in the organizations to shift towards bringing out teamwork, leadership, etc. And then something magical happened in wanting to bring this approach out to the general public. My co-author and I were gifted with an amazing editor who kept pushing back on us around simplify, simplify, simplify. It's got to be simple or people can't do it. And so he kept pushing back. And in that process, the book emerged. And it wasn't until a couple of months after the book came out, and I was working with clients around conversation, and suddenly the notion that had been in my head around we create our conversation, we create the social systems through our conversations, suddenly I had this whole being experience of it's all about our conversations. It's that simple. It's just our conversations. What are we talking about? And if you look at the world right now and the conversations that are going on, we move in the direction of our conversations. So are we reinforcing what is, or are we shifting those conversations? And I would like you to imagine just for a moment that there's a parallel world. And in that parallel world, our conversations are generating social and economic systems that allow all people to thrive. It allows every person to tap into their unique gift and bring it into the world. That our school systems in that parallel world inspire children to want to learn, that they discover their strengths and their own unique gift and find ways to be able to bring that into the community to enhance what's going on in the community. That we are living with renewable energy, that we raise and eat food that feeds our bodies and our health, that we have healthcare systems that work for everyone. Just imagine being in that world. How many of you have a foot in that world already? You're already working there. Thank you. And I wonder what would happen if all of us put both feet in that world. And whatever you're doing, having conversations that are geared towards creating, whatever you're doing, creating it so that it will work in that parallel world. Because if we pull all of our energy and our focus and our attention and our passion and our wonder into that parallel world, there is nothing stopping us from bringing it into existence. We created this one over here. We can create this one. And it's not always easy because, and I'll be the first to say that, I can easily get hooked by the news. I can get hooked into a conversation that drags me over here. But if we be mindful and realize and really pay attention to the fact that wherever we focus, that's where we're going to go. And so even if we want to fix or solve something over here, What is it that we want to create? Where do we want to go instead? Let's focus there. And then let's wonder together. Let's not create solutions too quickly. Let's ask lots of questions, generative questions that generate connection, mindfulness, shared understanding, shared possibilities and visions for that future, and then wonder into how do we design that together. So I hope you'll join me in stepping into this world. Thank you very much.